On today's, I guess, throwback edition, but also the new wave edition of the Grind Hours podcast, we are going to be talking about a lot of sports. Go figure. It finally, almost 7 months into the year, we actually get to have regular sports conversations on a daily basis. Anyway, I alluded to a throwback and a new norm. We're going to do it radio style from here on out. The schedule's still going to be the same, Tuesday, Thursday, but they're going to be shortened episodes and more of a traditional radio style. It's more what I love to do, and I hope that you guys, as the listeners, catch on and love it as much as I do. It's what I want to do for a living, and I could not think of a better guest to usher in this style than my old radio partner who I did. Do we do a day of radio on air, do you think? Do we do 24 hours of radio together, Austin?
You and I during the walk-on?
Yes.
Probably. We were doing, yeah, for sure. We have more than 24 episodes.
So we've done that's crazy to think about. We've done a day's worth of radio together, on air, live. That's crazy.
And it was honestly an incredible experience. And I don't want to toot our own horn, but hey, it was a damn good show.
Yeah, and that's what I want to bring to this show. And what I can think of some better ways to lead the show than talking about the New England Patriots, but go figure, in 2020, the first team to make major news in free agency, in any free agency, or really anything the entire year, is the New England Patriots signing Cam Newton from free agency, $7.5 million for one season, which, if you look at it in an entire season, the Patriots are basically getting Ryan Tannehill the entire year. And Cam's better than Tannehill, but the Tannehill revenge tour that we saw at the back half of last year, that a bunch of fantasy owners reaped the benefits of, me being one of them. It's a Patriots move. It's a move that I'm not surprised about. I thought it was going to happen months ago. I understand now why they did it so late to get him on that type of salary. Austin, what is your first reaction to this? And I'll lead it into the questions. Do you think that this move helps the Patriots win the NFC or the AFC East rather?
Well, first and foremost, always excited to be back on the show, and even more excited to be doing it, as you said, radio style. And it's even more exciting to have some sports to talk to and look forward to in the next month. Now, as far as this move is concerned, I think it absolutely helps the Patriots. Like we were talking about a little bit before we went on the air, Cam Newton in 2018 was a top 12 quarterback. And, of course, last year he was plagued by injury. The reason I'm so excited about this move is because of the narrative. This is the ultimate test now. We're really going to see this season if it was Brady or if it was Belichick. Because as far as I'm concerned, Belichick has no excuses. He now has a quarterback who's a former MVP, who can be a top 12 quarterback. And if he can't turn him into a champion or even more of a superstar than he already was, it might have been Brady.
I don't want to push that narrative yet. Honestly, just because of how good Cam is as a quarterback, I really don't want to push that narrative. Because it's not Stidham. If it was Stidham, then yeah, you can say was it Brady or was it Belichick. With Cam, if he's healthy, the level of quarterback that he can be, his last full season, it wasn't even a full season because he got hurt at the end of it and played 14 games. He had almost 3,400 yards, 5 yards short of 3,400 yards, 24 touchdowns, 13 picks, which is not great touchdown-interception ratio, but it's definitely better than a lot of the quarterbacks that started last year. On the ground, he had almost 500 yards, 4 additional touchdowns, and oh, by the way, his passer rating was 94.2, which is the second highest of his career. The only one better than that was the year that he won the MVP in 2015. So you're right. He is a top-tier guy. He can change an offense completely, and it's going to be interesting for me to see how Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick come into the modern generation of the NFL with a dual threat quarterback who can excel at both ends of the spectrum on offense. And it's going to be weird seeing some read options with the Patriots. It's going to be weird seeing some triple options and some Philly specials in their own right. So they can play with this a lot more than if they had Stidham at quarterback. And it's really the first time Belichick has his hat in the ring with this because he's had Brady for 20 years. So I think that is going to be the thing that will honestly take the league by storm, because this truly unlocks everything that Belichick can do as a coach. And it's terrifying. It really is.
Yeah, and listen, don't get it twisted. This absolutely is a new era for the Patriots, and probably indicative of the NFL. I know Cam Newton's been around for a while, so he's not this new young rookie quarterback. We're familiar with Cam Newton, but him being on this team with this coach, this is a new era for Cam Newton, the Patriots, and all of football, despite him being an old face.
Do you think they'll win the NFC? Last thing before we get out of here, do you think they'll win the NFC or the A? Why do we keep wanting to call it the NFC East? I guess I was talking about the Giants yesterday, and that's why. Do you think that they'll play Jesus? Do you think that they'll win? Do you think they'll win the AFC East? And how far in the playoffs, if they do win the AFC East, do you think they'll go?
Well, I think that I can't say that. I think they're going to win the AFC East because I have no reason not to. The only threat to them in the AFC East is the Jets, and the Jets aren't much of a threat to me.
They're not, especially with the schedule racking up the way that it does for the Jets compared to the Patriots,
right, so
who can sleepwalk to 9-7.
I think just by default, you have to give the AFC East to the Patriots. Now, as far as the playoffs are concerned, it's going to come down. I think it might take a year for them to get the fine-tuning down, so I think they'll advance, but I don't think they're going to the AFC Championship. But I do think that they'll get there, they'll give someone a run for their money, but this year's going to be all about fine-tuning. So watch out for 2021, because I think that's where we're going to get the best form of this new Patriots.
Do you think that Cam will come back? Because he obviously has something left in the tank. Do you think he'll come? Because it's only a one-year deal.
Oh, well, listen, if he makes the playoffs and if he is as effective as we know he can be, I think he'd be out of his mind to not come back. I mean, we're talking about the Patriots here. We're talking about rubbing shoulders with Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels. Any quarterback can come back.
I think he will too, and it's going to be terrifying to play him twice a year. And this just gives the Patriots yet another year in the playoffs. And seriously, if you don't believe me, look at their schedule. They could sleepwalk to 9-7 with Cam at the helm.
If it makes you feel any better, the Jets are about to screw us by giving Jamal to the Cowboys. I'm going to see him twice a year, so thanks for that.
I don't want to talk about that. I honestly, I don't think it's going to happen. Gun to my head, I don't think it's going to happen. I think they get a deal done because you cannot lose a guy like Jamal Adams. And if they do, I mean, I've been saying it a lot the past 2 years. Complete fire sale. Joe Douglas has failed as a GM. If he already, he will have failed as a GM if he doesn't re-sign Jamal Adams. Because the only thing that Mike McCagnon got right was Jamal Adams. That is the only thing a broke clock is right twice a day, and I mean that was Mike McCagnon's one good pick out of the 3 years that he had. And I can't see it. Plus, I already think that the Jets are going to fire Gase after the third game because we're going to go 0-3. That's just a foregone conclusion, but I digress. That's a conversation for another day. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Feed Hudson Valley is a regional food rescue and harvesting network in the Hudson Valley operating through Dutchess, Orange, Ulster, Columbia, Greene, Putnam, and Sullivan counties. It links donors of prepared but unserved food and fresh produce with nonprofits and food assistant programs through an app-assisted network of food donors, volunteers, and feeding agencies. Feed Hudson Valley facilitates the harvesting, processing, and distribution of locally grown or produced agricultural products, self-stable food donations, and prepared nutritious foods. The app used is called Chow Match, and it is easy for volunteers to download and use. Among the donors are restaurants, farms, food makers, stores, hospitals, and universities. The food assistant programs include food pantries, soup kitchens, and shelters. Volunteers are matched through the Chow Match app when a donation is available. They can indicate that they are available to make a run and then pick it up for a donor and deliver it to the agency. The Feed Hudson Valley network currently includes over 300 volunteers, 130 donors, and 95 receiving agencies. Last year, on average, Feed Hudson Valley rescued and redirected over 12,000 pounds of food each month. Feed Hudson Valley could use more donors and volunteers. To learn more and sign up, visit feedhv.org. Again, that's feedhv.org. One more time, spelled out, feedhv.org. Now back to the podcast. First segment, we were talking about how Cam has just granted the Patriots yet another division title and rule over the AFC. Let's switch gears completely to the NBA, and in particular, this backstory episode last night, which again, I think it's the first episode of the series, but I'm not sure. It, to me, looks like a bigger E60, and there's just more money thrown at this. I don't understand why E60 has been around for a decade, and they could just pour all the money that they're going to pour into this series into that. Anyway, it goes into LeBron's decision in 2010, and that's what I want to talk about here, is this whole series looks like it's going to go into the big and bad of the past decades of sports stories. It started with the decision. They did not include any interviews from LeBron or Maverick Carter or Rich Paul. And the reason for that, and they say this in the episode, is because LeBron's already done it. They also didn't get Jim Gray for that show, which I don't understand. I didn't even know who Jim Gray was, to be with you, before the decision. And it seems like he's just fallen off the face of the earth since the decision, and that was like his one big thing. Austin, the reason why I bring this up is it talks about how it was a watershed moment for athletes, and in particular black athletes, controlling their own stories as a whole and bypassing the media. And LeBron taking the power from the media and turning it on its head and being the trailblazer that he is now. And it ushered in a decade of player-made super teams. So my question to you is, what do you think the second evolution of this is going to be?
Wow, I mean, that's a very heavy question. And I will do my best in answer that is fitting for the question. But, you talk about, black athletes being able to create their own story, and looking at the decision and what LeBron did, I guess the one word that comes to mind is finally, not really since Jordan has an athlete been able to control the narrative and control their story and be as storybook as LeBron James. And here we are a decade later, and we're seeing this new time in our country, and now black athletes are going to be able to tell even more of the story, which they should have been able to tell from the beginning, but they're going to be able to have more of a say and more of an impact in the game and out of the game, and prove that they're not just athletes, they're not just numbers. These are guys they're educated, they're smart, and they have a lot to offer. And, to have that start with a decision is not something I've ever thought of, but that is a good point that you made, and the documentary last night made that point very well. So I think the second evolution is ongoing. I think it's actually just started.
The one thing that I'm concerned about, just because both of us are journalists, is, and they bring this up in the piece, is how access is going to be granted to journalists. Because, like LeBron, I mean, KD has his own media company, so does Kyrie, so does Steph Curry, and Draymond's a part of the undefeated, or why am I? It's not the undefeated. He's part of the bronze thing anyway. So how do we the ongoing question is, how do journalists fit into this? Because everybody has a phone who's a major athlete. They could just go on, whether it's Players Tribune or their own Instagram or Twitter, and give out any of the information that they want. And LeBron basically bought out. I know he donated all the proceeds, all the ad money to charity, but he bought out an hour of primetime television in 2010. I don't know what that looks like in 2020, but it is interesting that we've just ran with it, and it wasn't a one-off. And I think it did succeed in the long term, because when it happened, everybody criticized it. It was universally shit on. And I think part of that was because LeBron and Maverick Carter didn't know what the hell they were doing with a TV show. I think if they did that now, it would be 100 times better. But, I mean, the other I guess I was shocked about was Bill Simmons actually kind of started this thing. And if you've listened to the pod for at any time, you know that I'm a big Bill Simmons fan. But the fact that he pitched it to ESPN and to Maverick Carter just himself, and maybe that's our job as journalists, is to pitch the stories to the athletes and then just let them do what they will with this. What do you think about that?
Well, assuming I understand what you're saying, I mean, I agree in part with that. I think that regardless of what you're reporting, you need to let them tell your audience who they are. If you're reporting on someone or a certain group of people, and you're interviewing or whatever, it's up to them to tell the audience who they are. It's really not your responsibility is to be an in-between, be a middleman, a gatekeeper, if you will, but not shift the narrative. And you asked the question of where do journalists fit in to this new scheme, and I'd say that they'll fit in wherever they need to. With the exception of newspapers, journalism has this incredible knack of adapting to new environments and new trends and new culture. So if every single NBA player or if every all-star gets their own media company, their own account, Instagram, on social media narrative they reported, then that's what will be reported, but journalism will still be there, and journalism will still be there to fact-check their narrative, to say this player's narrative is nonsense or this player's narrative is justified, just like how we do with politics and pop culture.
That's very interesting, and I never thought of it like that before. Sports being politics. Because both lines have been separate for years and years. And, I mean, that's not the case so anymore to a certain extent. But, no, that's very, very interesting. Last question before we get out of here and get a break. Do you think that, looking back on it, do you think the decision was the right thing for LeBron and for the NBA?
Well, for the NBA, it did what the NBA wanted, which was bring a lot of eyes to the product, which is what any sports organization wants. As far as LeBron himself, initially, I didn't think it was a good thing because it really shifted his legacy for worse. Because I remember during that time, people were, you were mad at LeBron for not going to your team, but a lot of people were mad because of the way he did it, because he had a whole hour on television dedicated to just him. Not like there's a bunch of other free agents. But that adds to the storybook that is LeBron James' career and life. So in the long run, we look back on it as, man, remember when basketball was this good?
For me, I think it's the right decision for LeBron because he is the catalyst for changing how players interact in the NBA. There was no player-created super teams before him. There was no player who negotiated his contract and his way out of his contract a year before his contract was up and got himself on a super team, or threatened teams to not re-sign and forcing them to make blockbuster trades to create super teams. So the player empowerment era that we're seeing now, and it's leaking into other sports slowly, was started by LeBron, and I don't think it could have started with anybody else but him. So for both, I think it was correct. And it was an interesting point that you made at the top there with your comment about the NBA. David Stern actually vehemently opposed this at the start. He called the head of ESPN at the time, John Skipper, and pleaded with him to not allow this to happen. So, I mean, I guess he turned around. He had a change of heart because of what you said. It got eyeballs on his sport and his product. And it's the highest rated ESPN live event that's non-sports still, with 13.4 million people tuning in when he actually made his announcement.
I remember vividly where I was. I remember watching it.
So do I.
With my sister and father, and I was like, "Oh, he's gonna be a bull. This is gonna be so good."
I was at my grandmother's house. I was rooting for him to go to the Nets, and then when he said, "I'm going to the Heat," this is not revisionist history. I'm gonna admit it on air. I jumped ship. I was a bandwagoner. I was a Heat fan until we went back to Cleveland, and then I went back to the Nets. So, I mean, kill me on Twitter all you want, but that's what happened, and I'm not ashamed of it because I actually got. It was fun. I'm not gonna sit here and say I saw my team win 2 titles because that really wasn't my team, but it was fun rooting for LeBron and the Heat for those 4 years.
So you and I were opposite. I became the biggest LeBron hater after that. And, I had Derrick Rose, so, those Eastern Conference Finals were intense for me.
Basketball was better back then. Let's take a quick break, and we'll come back to continuing to talk about the NBA. All right, and we're back. There's no second ad yet, so it's just, really quick transition, and we're right in here. So what I want to end the show on, and it's kind of heavy based off of the topic of conversation, but I think it's important to talk about, and that is the role that the Black Lives Matter movement has in the NBA, and it quite seriously could affect the entirety of the rest of the NBA season. There is a possibility that the NBA does not come back and they stand in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement and not play the rest of the season. I think that would have just as a great of an impact as LeBron's decision had on the sport, and I think it would give athletes of color in this country a serious voice, and it would, yes, hurt the chances of the NFL starting on time, because I think if the NBA doesn't start on time, the NFL will follow in that fact. And I just want your take on this, Austin, because the Kyrie Irving and Dwight Howard-led movement to postpone the rest of the NBA season is a strong one, and it is getting a lot of backing from people in the league. And I really just want your thoughts on this.
Let me collect my thoughts here for a second, because it is a very heavy question. Uh, well, I think first and foremost, if we're being honest, I almost feel like I'm not at liberty to say what's right and what's wrong in terms of how they decide to go about this season. They are black men in America. This is their struggle. This is their fight. The best thing we can do as fans, as journalists, as radio guys, the best thing we can do is be allies. So if they decide not to play, the only thing for us to do is stand in solidarity. And I see people online, and the frustration is there because these guys are millionaires, and like, oh, they have the privilege to not play, but it's deeper than that. It's something that a lot of us simply don't understand because we never had to experience it. But I think what's amazing about this time in our country is that we're getting educated on experiencing it. As far as Kyrie Irving is concerned, if he's holding up the season because of the Black Lives Matter movement, then I cannot fault him. And I have been, of course, I'm going to support him in every which way. I've heard mumblings that he was holding up the season because of COVID-19 and that he was injured and because he couldn't go to Orlando, he was kind of like being petty. I don't know what's true and what's not true because I can't get inside Kyrie Irving's head. But assuming the movement is to not play in solidarity with that movement, then it's time to step aside and get behind them.
For both causes, for the Black Lives Matter movement and for not wanting to play because of COVID-19, I can't fault either player for taking a stance. Guys like Avery Bradley and Trevor Ariza who have family members. Avery Bradley has a 6-year-old son that has a history of respiratory issues. There's no way in hell I'm going to criticize him for sitting out the rest of the season and wanting to spend it with his family and not jeopardize his son's life. Same thing for Trevor Ariza, who just had a newborn kid. I get it. I wouldn't want to do it either. And I wouldn't want to put my family in that position either. And with the Black Lives Matter movement, again, I'm not going to criticize anybody for it because, one, I'm a white guy. So if I do that, I'm automatically a piece of shit. And two, I couldn't possibly imagine the struggles that black people in this country have to go through. And I think it would be a net positive for the NBA to stand behind this movement and just say, you know what? There are bigger things at risk here. And there are things that we need to talk about in this country and fix before sports are played again. And honestly, I would hate to see it for all sports, but I understand it and I will stand with it. I wouldn't be opposed to all the leagues taking a stand with the BLM movement. I'm all for it, and whether or not that happens will remain to be seen. But I, for one, if it was up to me, I would err on the side of educating my players, educating the country, and being a driving force for change, because that impact will make your league last for eons to come. Because that's something, if we look back on this time in the history books and we say, you know what, the NBA actually took a stand and helped progress change in this country, that is going to mean more than the Los Angeles Lakers holding up the NBA Finals trophy in Orlando on October whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, and I think it's clear that the players feel that way. And it's a cultural thing. I think every sport has its own culture. I don't think baseball will stop. I just don't. And the NFL, I'm sure. I feel like, we're getting a taste of, we can call it controversy if you want, controversy or miscommunications from players with, like, the top brass in the league and the culture. But if you think this is stressful, wait until the NFL season comes around. And we're talking about kneeling, and we're going to say, where's Kaepernick? I mean, the NFL is going to have hell to pay this coming season. And I can't wait to watch Goodell, honestly.
Goodell, since the video that he put out on Twitter, has shown a complete change of heart publicly. Whether or not he feels that personally, I don't know. And I hope that he does have a change of heart and back the players and give them a platform to protest and progress change, because they do. Every player in the NFL does have that platform for them to do that if they so choose. It's going to be interesting to see with guys like Jerry Jones and the Johnson family and other owners in the NFL, if they feel the same way that the commissioner does about this movement, and whether or not.
The way I see it, it's so simple. If you want to see how a sports organization should be run, then you look at the NBA and you look at Adam Silver, who's allowing players to have statements about the BLM movement on their jerseys instead of their name. And if you want to see how not to run a league, look at Roger Goodell, who is saying, if you're kneeling, then you're distracted from the game. We can't have that. You must stand up for the national anthem. And I'm going to allow, and he didn't say it out loud, but in his lack of action, he allowed players to be blackballed out of the league.
Again, the video on Twitter that he posted about a month ago is a complete change of heart from that, and I hope that that is where the NFL stands, and they also lead the change in this country for the better. Austin, it was a pleasure having you on the show. I'm sorry that we had to end on such a heavy topic, and a topic that warrants a bigger discussion than just 10 minutes. But it was a pleasure talking to you. It was a pleasure having you on the show. You will be back very soon, I'm sure. The invitation is always extended your way. And let the people know where they can find you before we get out.
Hey, well, thank you so much for having me. This is always so much fun. You can find me on Twitter at AirSanti, AIR_Santi, or on Instagram, which is at your boy Santi. That's YA_boy_Santi. So find me there if you can type it in the right way.
On this side of the coin, not the fake Gilio on Twitter, JDataSports.com. Got some heat coming your way on the blog. I know I've been slacking in the month of, or in the year of 2020 on the writing side, but be on the lookout for that. And of course, this podcast. If you've reached this part of the show, please like, subscribe, share with anybody who you seem fit. If you're on iTunes, please give us a review. It means more to the show than you know. And huge thanks to Feed Hudson Valley for being a sponsor on the show. Again, just for complete not getting any money from Feed Hudson Valley. It is just something that I thought that I would do during the COVID-19 pandemic as sort of an outreach for this podcast and for me. So if you want to come back after this, and also before I forget, please let me know on Twitter how you think or what you think of this new format, where you want me to adjust it and go from here. And yeah, I will be looking at my mentions heavily this week for that. So until next time, it's closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Peace.